Welcome back, Smart Start Radio family. Before we get into our latest amazing episode, we have a quick word from our sponsor. With spectacular hotels, amazing theme parks, and unparalleled entertainment, Universal Orlando Resort offers a meeting destination unlike anything else in the world.
Smart Start Radio, Smart Start Radio. Ready, set, here we go with another episode. Watch as we learn and grow. At Smart Start Radio, Smart Start Radio. Ready, set, here we go with another episode. Watch as we learn and grow. Starting smart is the action we design.
What a great way to kick off the first episode of the season for Smart Start Radio with our new anthem from Event Wrap. Again, I love it. I hope you guys love it. And I'm so glad we have a fresh new sound to kick off this year, because this year's going to be really good. Once again, in case you don't know me, in case you're new, and if you're not new, welcome back. If you're new, welcome. My name is Eming Piansay. I am the multimedia editor as well as the host for Smart Start Radio. And I'm very excited for this show. I'm very excited for this new season. I'm very excited to share with you guys all the new things that we've learned and people we've talked to this year. It's going to be really great. But we're going to rewind the clock a little bit because this story happened last year. I was at IMEX and I went to a neurodivergency session and I met Yush Sztalkoper. She's the founder of NeuroSpark Plus. She has so many great things to say on the topic of neurodiversity. For us, it's very important at Smart Meetings to go back to issues we talked about and explore it deeper, because there are so many people who know so many more things than I could ever begin to speak on. And it's always good to just kind of get into it and really explore deeper on the topic. And so I was really happy that I met Yush at IMEX, and I really love this conversation. And I hope you guys do too. So on that note, we're going to swing back through time, and I'll see you guys in a sec. How's it going, Smart Start Radio? Welcome to the beginning of our 2026 season of Smart Start Radio. I'm super, super jazzed, excited, because I have an amazing guest today who I'm so excited to introduce. Yush Sztalkoper, the founder of NeuroSpark, is here with me today on the show. I met her at IMEX for a session she was doing. Low-key, she rewrote my brain. Like, her thoughts and opinions on neurodiversity were just, I was just in awe. Like, my mouth was on the floor for half of the conversation she was having. So Yush, just to kind of get our listeners a sense of who you are as a person and your org, can you kind of briefly speak about what you do and who you are and all the wonderful things that I know, but they might not know yet about you?
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Eming, for inviting me to this conversation. I'm so glad that you were able to attend one of my sessions and so thrilled that you came up to speak to me afterwards and we made this connection. My name is Yush Sztalkoper and I'm the founder of NeuroSpark Plus. And I actually spent nearly almost 20 years in the events industry. So this is why I am so active in this space. And, for the 20 years on paper, I was succeeding, but inside I was masking, burnout, and disconnected. Didn't know that about myself until about a year and a half ago when I was diagnosed with ADHD. And what sort of led to that discovery was my son, who is twice exceptional. Twice exceptional is when you're both gifted and neurodivergent at the same time. So you just have very complex and unique wiring. And so I started to see a lot of my son in myself. And it became sort of this mirror of understanding how his brain worked and how I started to notice those patterns about myself. And as I dug further into this work, because when you're a parent, it's almost like crash course into everything that I needed to understand: neuroscience, psychology, behavior, the brain, you just name it. And so I started to notice that this wasn't just about me and him. I noticed these patterns in others within our industry, but also started to notice those patterns systemically. And so that's what led me to build NeuroSpark Plus, because I noticed that there was this huge gap in supporting and also understanding neurodivergence in sort of a more positive light. So my work today is really just helping other people understand their wiring on a more root level, how deep down, who we are really creates the person that we become and all these things that we believe about ourselves. And we have the power to shift that and to change that. And so I think all of this translates to our work in the events industry about design, human connection, belonging. It sits at the core of all these things. So that's kind of who I am, why I'm here, and why I'm in this industry that I absolutely love, but starting to really show up very differently than how I used to.
Yeah. Yeah. So the two things that you said that changed my brain for like eternity was the first thing was term you mentioned, where it's like people who feel things more sensitively and how you kind of interpret it as like being your fault. I can't remember what the word is specifically. It's on my phone somewhere, but yeah, but based on like, being sensitive and then like kind of assuming like the worst because of that and like taking everything a little bit more, intensely. I was like, wow, that's an actual thing. I thought that was just me being strange and being overly sensitive, but there's an actual term for it. If I don't know if that helps you recall the term, but
no, absolutely. So highly sensitive is a brain wiring, and it's a unique wiring that I practice and have been trained in what is called positive intelligence, which has been responsible for shifting literally the way I think about everything. So I've been able to rewire my brain to thinking more positively. So when I started this journey with my son, for instance, I knew only of neurodivergence as a deficit, as a weakness, as a struggle, as a challenge.
Right.
More and more I went down this journey of helping to understand him, I started to see things in a different light and understanding and recognizing that neurodivergence is actually all about these strengths and superpowers that you have. So being highly sensitive is actually one of them. What that superpower or strength is being highly attuned to others. Where the highly sensitive individuals are the ones that walk into the room and can just feel the energy and can read body language. You might not be able to pinpoint or explain it, but you sense something that is deeper than what you can describe on the surface. And that is what makes us incredible in this industry. It's what makes us be able to design for that human experience, that emotional experience. It's what allows us to be really great at client service because we know how to read the energy and going into meetings. Like some people would call it intuition, but it's something about it being an internal part of who you are. And so that I hope that recaptures kind of what you heard.
Yeah. Second thing that you said, so we were talking, I can't remember what we were talking about, and then behind us, the music just boomed really loud.
Yes.
And you paused, and then you felt like your heart rate go up immediately afterwards. And you're like, even though we have headphones on, even though we have like this like kind of cushion between us and the sound, I'm feeling very anxious now in spite of the fact that we have these, these headphones, but there's this clear, loud music behind us. And right after you said that, my Apple Watch was like, your heart rate just spiked. And I was like, oh, so that is, okay. Like, so you were giving me these contexts as someone who's like, I don't know if I'm anything, honestly. I've never spoken to a doctor about this, but I kind of a sense I probably might. But it was a validation of like, oh, like this is real. It's not just your body reacting to just whatever. Like there's a reason for it. So in the events world, like everyone's made differently. So in your mind, how can events kind of align with the mismatches of like making certain people who, don't necessarily feel comfortable in certain spaces because there are certain like trigger things where it's lights, where it sounds, where it's anything that's, makes you feel just too much at any given time. So I guess my question is, where can that kind of live in a way where meetings are more thoughtful about stuff like that?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to touch on a couple of things because there was a lot there that I worth addressing. First, a lot of people aren't aware of the fact that neurodiversity applies to every single one of us. Neurodiversity is just means that we are all wired differently neurologically.
Right. Yeah.
And so if you think of biodiversity, we know the importance of having all the different faunas and plant life and because it contributes to the ecosystem. So the way that we need to think about neurodiversity is the same. We need a diversity of thought in order for us to be able to problem solve and create differences and experiences and all these things as humans. And so neurodiversity is every single one of us. And so what neurodivergence is that there's a smaller population of people who's wired even more differently than the whole group of us. And so those individuals tend to have heightened awareness. They tend to be more sensitive. They tend to be better at problem solving and pattern spotting, all these like things that all these superpowers that I call them in our industry that actually is what contributes to our success. And so those are the things that we need to be able to pay attention to. And so that heightened awareness, so this is essentially all stems from your nervous system. So that example you provided, I actually, as a neurodivergent individual, was already pretty overstimulated. And this is the reality of events. Events are created for people to operate on adrenaline, right? Like more, louder, faster, more exciting, all of that. And what that does is it requires individuals to be able to keep up with that pace. And for neurodivergent individuals, it's hard because for a neurodivergent individual, just to get through a regular day, they expend so much more energy. And just moving through the world, right?
Yeah.
Being able to regulate, being able to. So that example I provided was really powerful because it seemed like such a minor thing, but it had a big impact on my nervous system. So I'm sitting on the panel just to paint a picture for everybody else.
Yeah.
I'm sitting on the panel and it's moderated, and my moderator was speaking at this point. So I was purely just listening. As I was listening to him, I heard this, and in the IMEX setting, as you know, there are no walls. And so the session spaces are open, but we wear these headsets so that we can hear each other. And there was this really loud sound that was louder than, what our headsets were able to kind of cover up. And I sensed it. And automatically what it did was it made my nervous system go into alert mode, which made me nervous and stressed out. And I was like, what was that? And then here's the ripple effect. Because my nervous system felt unsafe because I didn't know what that sound was,
Right.
it made my heart rate go up. Because we all know that stress is associated with a raised heart rate. And then that's when adrenaline gets dumped into your bloodstreams. And then you're just kind of like in high arousal state. And you kind of, and then I was like, oh, okay, because the sound went away and I was like, everything's fine. But what happened in that moment is it actually distracted me from what my moderator was saying. So I missed a few words. I mean, this was like seconds, right? But
it's quick.
It distracted me. It like made me feel like stressed for a moment. I didn't know what was going on. And I didn't hear what my moderator was saying, which, if you're a panelist and you need to be able to have a conversation, it was really challenging. So I shared that with the audience because I wanted them to experience my lived experience as a neurodivergent individual. That is what I meant by a heightened and, sensitive nervous system.
Right.
And so I think that's why I loved that hearing from you that your heart rate, your watch alerted you to that.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't the only one that heard that really loud bang. I mean, it was so loud that it was kind of like, disarming.
Yeah.
And so I think when we start to be very attuned to our body and how we react and respond to stimulus in the environment, that's when we start to be able to do something about it. And so I think the other thing that I shared when I shared this moment was how I calmed myself down.
Right.
I started to take deep breaths because I knew I was fine. Everything was safe. Nothing was happening. So I took deep breaths, which is so powerful, and to calm my nervous system down. And then I did through positive intelligence, I rubbed my forefinger and my thumb together to create this distraction for my sensory system, focus on these other senses so that I could calm down. Because that's a deep breath. I mean, you could access any of your other senses. But so there was a lot of, things happening in these micro moments. Even though I just spent a lot of time talking about it, this was seconds, right? This was like seconds and it happened. But sharing things like that helped you then realize that, that bothered me too. And that kind of forced my nervous system to go into an unsafe place. And how do you bring it back, to me, is the key. It's like all of us are wired this way, and self-awareness is really important. But then how do you bring yourself back to safety?
Yeah. Because in events, it's like it's a fast-paced universe. Like there's not a lot of places to ground yourself or bring yourself back to normal because you're constantly on the go. So I guess in your opinion, when people are designing events, this might be a bigger question, but what are some things that people can think of to making an experience that feels safe for everyone from the minute they are walking down the corridor to checking in to exploring the halls? Are there things that you think are essential to that experience that aren't necessarily being used often enough right now?
Well, I think for me, because there are so many specifics that we can get into, but I think for us to understand this from a top level perspective, I think about energy. I think about the human energy, and the way that you want to design your experiences is you start with a core question. Does this experience energize or does it drain? And so if the answer is it could be draining because this layout, let's just let's start with navigation. That's an easy one. And a lot of people already recognize the value of creating a very streamlined and easy flow and ability for people to find where they need to go. So the reason why that is highly important for a neurodivergent individual is, remember earlier I mentioned that just for a neurodivergent individual to move through the world requires a lot more. And that's because they are so hyper-focused on everything and they notice everything. And so navigation, if, for instance, I get lost and I don't know my way to a session, what that then is going to create is stress in my nervous system. Oh my gosh, I'm going to be late to this session. I have no idea where anything is. And so it isn't just about like this ease and flow. It's more around, are you creating an experience that actually gives me back energy because I already know where I'm going and this is very intuitive? Or is it going to drain my energy because I got lost, I couldn't find my session space, and I didn't know where there was a space for me to like just pause and unwind? And so, you know, that to me is a very obvious one, because when you start to think about energy, you start to understand why it's important. The other things that I think are really, that is more sort of a blanket, but applies to a lot of our design, is thinking about choice. When it comes to neurodivergent individuals, look, there are some events at such scale and large attendance that you don't have a lot of control over some of the logistical components.
Right.
And so when you think about that, you think, well, how can I still design something that is safe for a neurodivergent individual and potentially people who are neurotypical who also get drained, right? Having to navigate this. And the way to think about it is, what choice am I offering them so that they can choose what feels safe for them? You know, I was just on a podcast with Tracy Jakrath, and she and I were talking about food choices. You know, food isn't just about, does it taste good? Does it look good? Is it, you know, is there, do we have dietary accommodations? It's more around like, also, what does that person prefer to eat? I eat very healthy. So I want whole foods, options, vegetables, fruits, you know, things that routine. And so for me, like around the food topic, it's just choice and options. Are you given choice to eat something that is what I need to feed my energy? Or are you telling me that I need to eat what everybody else is eating? So that choice is how it starts to show up.
Looking for a way to add some swagger to your meeting? Hold it in Dallas. You'll find 20 plus diverse neighborhoods bustling with entertainment, art, and chef's kiss-worthy food. Not to mention the world's best downtime icebreaker, the famous Margarita Mile. Whether it's a Michelin Guide-recognized chef's table for 10 or seats at a big game for 1,000, Dallas is a playground for networking, team bonding, and after-the-meeting memorable moments. At its heart, you'll find a vibrant, walkable arts district, voted #1 in America. Drop into downtown's historic Deep Ellum neighborhood for a show, or take the team and the energy to the next level atop one of Uptown's stylish rooftops. Get the creative juices flowing in the colorful Bishop's Arts District or any of Lower Greensville's trendy hotspots. Want to energize your attendees with just the right amount of that legendary Dallas swagger? Start planning your meeting at visitdallas.com. And now back to our show.
Navigation. If you get the choice of being able to navigate in certain ways that fit your wiring and fit energy needs, that is going to create safety for that individual. And then I think about pace a lot. And we as an industry are so used to is more, faster, brighter, louder. It's all about putting almost this show, right? It's about creating this excitement and experience. I think we need to start thinking about, how do we shift to actually thinking about creating more regulation? How do we feel more grounded in this experience? How can I feel safer just being able to show up the way I am and my needs without feeling like, ooh, I'm out of place and this is not for me? Because what we ultimately want is, we want attendees and all participants, people who are part of the event ecosystem, who made the events possible. We want everybody to leave feeling like they're energized and not completely drained. And I know that's a reality right now in our industry. We hear about how exciting and invigorating and connective and all of these experiences. But then we also hear that people are utterly beaten up, drained, and need literally like days or weeks to recover.
Yes.
Does it have to be both of those things, how can we figure out a design and experience that honors our wiring, our nervous system needs, our energy needs, our biological rhythms, culture, and why, like all these things, so that when we leave, we're not completely depleted.
Right. So kind of going back to the sensory part, like how can events be designed in a way where for sound and lighting how can event creators be more thoughtful in that respect? Because, certain people respond to like, flashing lights or loud sounds. And obviously like it's hard to find a space somewhere in the middle where everyone's happy, obviously. But what in your mind makes the most sense in terms of like making spaces feel safer with those elements in mind?
Yeah, no, and that's a great question. So one of the things that I love talking about is when we design from the edges, we elevate the experience for everyone. And the reason, and it's a very common concept. We've heard of it. It's called universal design. It's called, if we design from the edges, you benefit everybody in the center. So I see the neurodivergent lens that I operate out of and how I think about design and events as almost a blueprint. So the neurodivergent individuals and their heightened and overstimulating and overwhelming experiences, to me, is a signal to that, hey, there's something here that is too much. And those heightened systems, I call myself the canary in the coal mine. It's like, how can I tell other people and show other people that this is not sustainable for all? And so when we start to design through that neurodivergent lens, so let's say as a designer, strategist, event planner, whatever your role is, you're thinking, I need to design this experience. I would definitely encourage people to start from, how does this experience feel for a neurodivergent individual? And then how do we design that so that it can meet their needs, so that they can come more energized and leave more energized than they have in the past? And then what you will find out, and this is universal design in practice, what you will find out is that everybody else also benefits from these experiences that aren't overstimulating, right? You talk about bright lights. That's a clear example. I think, as we know in keynotes, like the keynote is all about like the amazing technology, the amazing build, the stage, the lights, the sound, the audiovisual, all of it. But for people who could have seizures from, blinking lights, it is harmful. And so that individual will not be able to participate. So then they have the responsibility to remove themselves from that situation. And this is why, like, as planners, now there are signages up saying, hey, there might be strobe lights. It's a very similar concept in thinking about neurodivergent design or inclusive design. Well, why do we need that person to not be included? Can we design something that actually will be able to include them, but end up benefiting everybody? Because I don't know many people who are like, I love strobe lights and blinding lights. And it's, and that's the way that we need to start thinking about it. If you go out and you survey neurotypical people and you say, hey, I made all these design changes that are going to benefit your sensory system, I highly doubt they're going to say, no, thanks, I don't want that. I think that's where, as an industry, we need to start shifting our perspective on doing bigger and more and louder and more stimulating, because we translate that to more engaging and more exciting, to what is more grounding and what is more regulating for all human beings. And when you start to use that sort of theme and you follow that as North Star in designing, and look, realistically, you can't make all those changes right away. But I encourage everybody, if you're not already doing these things, like, I'm sorry, you're behind. Because you're more aware. We're talking about Gen Z, already a lot more aware of their wiring and a lot more aware of their environment and what type of environment they need to thrive in and what drains their energy, right? What's overstimulating, what's overwhelming. And my son's generation is Gen Alpha. And so he's going to be our future workforce, future attendees, your event planners, like everything. They're going to be even more well-versed, and they're most likely going to be even more neurodivergent just due to environmental stimulus. And if you think about screens and AI, everything is just a lot more stimulating. And so that's actually wiring the brain. So we're talking about designing for future here too. And this design thinking is, I think, what we need to adopt to be able to meet the needs of Gen Z and Gen Alpha and all the generations that come after.
Speaking of design, I'm curious, as someone who, you probably go to a lot of events and you could probably notice a lot of things off the bat, but what are like the top few things that you've noticed that you're just like, this is not going to benefit someone who walks in? Like, it's like jarring. Like if you had like a top like 3 things that you were like, these things are done way too often and they probably need to be.
So I think it's really challenging in our industry to eliminate these experiences.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's the key or the answer. The answer is, how do we start to almost like reverse design? How do we design from like the individual human lens first? And how do we think about like, what does that person need versus like, how am I going to accommodate 10,000 attendees, right? So I will start with trade shows. They are very, very hard for neurodivergent individuals. Just because the nature of trade shows, they are meant to be big, loud, robust, different. Because the reality is, in IMEX, for instance, this was an experience there where IMEX can't control the different booths, the different designs, the different energy levels, the different, all of it, the visual, the auditory, the sensory. And so I think that's where the biggest challenge for me is in this industry is trade shows, where it's really all about volume. It's all about difference. And it's all about how do we get somebody's attention and very quickly. And so the way that I think our industry can rethink, how do I get somebody's attention through being louder or brighter or more exciting or offering something that, the eye and the ears can hear. I think we need to kind of go backward. It's almost like the opposite. What is quiet and calm and grounding that it automatically signals safety for a nervous system that is very sensitive? And so I think of nature. I think of calm music. I think about foods that attract. I was at IMEX and there was a lot of booths offering alcohol. And they were loud music and they were offering treats and sweets and ice cream. For me, I biohack, so I focus a lot on wellness and health and my diet I eat. And I would have loved to see whole fruits, somebody giving out whole fruits or somebody offering mineral water or, more like sort of healthy, energizing options. There was a booth that was on the perimeter of IMEX that I loved called the Studio. And they created a very, very simple design that had greenery over, a simple wall. And that to my eyes, to my neurodivergent system, signals safety. I'm like, there's nature here. And what we all know nature is grounding. I mean, we hear every resource and source out there going outside, being in nature. Why is that calming? It's because the nervous system automatically associates safety with green and earth and nature and oxygen and flowers, right? That's all positive things. And now I think our systems are starting to recognize what's not safe, which is the loud noise, right? And the bright shining lights and the oh my gosh, there's visual everywhere. I learned through helping to understand my son's nervous system and now mine that 70% of what our nervous system processes is through our eyes. And so we're talking about design that somebody can just look at your booth, and if it's overstimulating and there's too many colors and different imagery and different visuals, it can be a lot, right? And so and also the colors you choose. And we all know that there's certain colors that are calming, and that's because it's feeding our visual system. And so when I think of a booth that would be idealistic, it would ideally be one that's soundproof, one that has, healthy, organic foods and whole foods and drinks that nourishes my energy level rather than deplete. Greenery, flowers, just nature, natural things. I actually think it could save people a lot of money. And it might not attract everybody, because one of the things that I realize is that because we're wired a certain way, we're attracted to this industry because it is high energy, adrenaline, excitement, that we've almost been conditioned. Want to seek that. So there will definitely be people in this industry who want those things. But what happens is then they eventually will get to a point of burnout where they're just their nervous system has just been overstimulated and overwhelmed. And so we hear a lot about burnout and masking and all of that, because we now live in a world where it's a lot of overstimulating external stimulating sort of factors that is impacting us.
Yeah. One thing I'm curious about is for these things to kind of take root in any organization, it really has to come from the top down. So what are some things that you would offer up as like, food for thought for people who, are the people making these decisions about how to structure their events, but don't necessarily they don't necessarily have the experiences, or they don't know the people, or they don't really have a good, grip on what that would look like in terms of their event space. So I guess my question is what are some thoughts that you could offer to people who are in those kind of upper levels, C-suite levels, to be like, you know what, these are the things that you need to think about when designing your events, because there are people who are going to your events who do need them, and you need to be thoughtful about them, because ultimately that's an ROI for you.
No, I think that's a great question, because I do feel like the gateway to this transformation and shift in how we think about inclusive and human-centered design is top down. Leaders have to understand, embrace, and adopt this different way of thinking about how we support human thriving versus depleting human energy, right? And so at that leadership level, to be able to recognize that, but also for the leaders to understand, like you said, how that translates to ROI, but it's not just ROI. So the way I think about neurodivergent, everything through a neurodivergent lens, is if you think about the event ecosystem, we all know the sheer volume of people and different roles and different sort of, we're talking about planners, CVBs, venues, caterers, AV, tech, speakers, everybody. So that the ecosystem of people, humans, that is required to pull off an event, we cannot just focus on the attendees and their experience. That should be the incentive, and that should be the motivation. I agree. And the outcome, you want retention, you want return attendance, and you want higher NPS scores, and you want all these things. But you almost need to go all the way back to the root. Thinking about ripple effect. If you support your neurodivergent strategists and planners, who I see a lot of commonalities in this industry, we attract this unique wiring, because people who, I have ADHD, and I can tell you that my pattern spotting abilities, my working well under pressure, my high emotional intelligence, my intensity, all these superpowers I have are very common in a lot of people in our industry. And so, if we're thinking about how we support those individuals that are innately wired this way, and be able to help them amplify those superpowers and strengths and support them in these other areas, what I believe is that will have a trickle down effect. That's a natural and organic part of what we're all striving for, which is attendance experience. Attendee experience. And so, to leaders, this is what I would say. When you start to think through a neurodivergent lens, use that as a blueprint for understanding all humans, not just your attendees, but your planners on your team and all the different suppliers and vendors that you engage, you start to be able to redesign every single aspect of an event. And then when you start to think about that way, because let's say event strategist is neurodivergent and they start to tap into their creativity and their ability to really understand the nervous system. And then they're like, okay, I'm going to work with suppliers who align with those values and that understanding. And then they hire speakers who are carrying a similar message. And then you design the experience through all of that. And I don't think I have to say the obvious. That's obviously going to then benefit the people who show up to the events, because all of those components would have been integrated into this full design journey. That will have its sort of ripple effect. So, I would love for leaders to understand that this isn't just about your attendees and that experience that you plan at the event, but everything that happens prior to that. And the beauty of this work in understanding and designing through a human-centered lens is that your participants not only experience something really powerful and grounding and energizing, they actually take that with them.
Right.
And it continues. They will bring it back to their workplaces. So bring it back to their industry. So bring it back to communities. And that's why I see events as this really important sort of microcosm of society, that we get connection and human-centered design right,
Mm-hmm.
We be able to take that and for it to impact, so many other spaces where all human beings.
Yeah. Currently, I mean, I feel like, the world is very strange right now, and there's a lot of people see this kind of as like a woke thing where it's like, people just want people to be the same and normal and one note. That's not reality. People are different and they respond differently to things. And it's important to acknowledge that, especially in the event spaces, there's a lot going on. Human bodies just respond differently to different visuals and stuff. And so what you're saying makes a lot of sense. And I really hope that people take that to heart for this episode.
And if leaders can see that it's an advantage, it's not just a leadership advantage, it's a competitive advantage. You are designing for humans, which is what people are starting to, like you said, wake up to. Oh my gosh, I'm a human and I've been masking my whole life and I've been struggling. I'm burnt out. What do I do about this? It's an advantage. And so, if that's what leaders need to hear, to me, at the end of the day, I'm like, I care less about why you're doing it, but if you're doing it and you're making a difference, that contributes to my mission of helping people thrive as individuals. So
I am curious though, have you met people who are just kind of opposed to, they don't see the value in this? Or is it mostly people who do see value in what you talk about?
I think, maybe I'm attracting people who already are sort of in this camp of understanding and recognizing the value of thinking through a neurodivergent lens and understanding humans. I think the response to your question is it's more about the people who are not engaging with me, that those are the people who are resistant to what I have to share, right? Because people who reach out to me, people who connect to me, people who engage with me on LinkedIn or, in person or whatnot, those are the people who already believe in my work and they understand the value of it. But trust me, Eming, there are a lot of people that I don't hear from, and those are the people that I want to work hard to convince that, there is something here that applies to every single one of us.
Yeah.
About universal frameworks that benefit all of us as individual human beings.
Right.
And, and you said something earlier about how people being normal, and being normal is a human social construct. Yeah. We created what normal is. And just as much as that we can create and normalize what normal is, we can do the same for differences. And to me, that's with the mindset shift. If we can shift the way that we think, and look, I know it's not easy. You can't just snap your fingers and be like, oh, I'm going to think differently. I have been doing this work for almost 5 years now because of my son, but I only started practicing positive intelligence, I want to say for 3.5 years. And every single day I'm working every single day to rewire my brain so that I don't default to this negative wiring and thought process. And this is a universal thing. Humans are wired to think negatively. It is not because we're bad people. It's just because it was a survival skill for our ancestors. If we notice the negatives, we would then be able to identify the threat and then we would be able to stay alive. It literally survival skill. But now we don't have those threats. So we don't need to think negative all the time. So for us to change the way that we think, we actually need to work every single day to slowly rewire our brain to thinking positively. All these things that we hear in our industry, psychological safety, empathy, well-being and belonging, all of those things is about human beings. And it has to start with us as individuals. And to me, it's all up here. Everything is within us. We just need to, shift that mindset or unlock our ability to think and see differently.
I feel like the people you talk to normally probably really like speaking to you because you probably have such positive things to say, and it probably feeds into that and makes them feel really good. Is that true?
Absolutely. And I have to say I'm very intentional about my language, the words I use, the tone, how I come across, and how I react and respond, because all of those things get mirrored. So we have what is called mirror neurons. When we are engaging and connecting with other people, our thoughts, feelings, emotions, body language, things that we might not even be aware of, it's contagious. And so I want my positivity to be contagious. I don't want my negativity. Like, so I don't see any space for me to be negative or think negatively. And I'll be the first to say I'm still working on this. There are moments where I have self-doubt. There are moments where I'm like, questioning myself and things like that. And then, but now I have tools to recognize that, Yush, that's your judge talking to you. Like, don't give your judge that power. How can I navigate this so that I remove that self-doubt? And instead, I think about the possibility and I think about potential, because, a lot of my speaking engagements, similar to the impact it had on you, when I talk about what I talk about and I share my lived experience and come from a very human place, what I notice is I offer people language and permission to feel and to think and to start to notice these things within themselves. And that to me is so powerful. So,
well, for the second time, in the past, month, you successfully that judge thing really hit me really hard. So, I was like, wow, okay, yes, I definitely have that voice in my head. You definitely touched on something that I feel like just as humans on a human level, not even like meeting, just human level, like we have these like narratives that we have in our head, which feed into everything that we're doing. And it's you have to show up in a way for yourself that feels authentic, but also, doesn't push you into like the dark side.
And you're so, the way that I've been able to get myself out of sort of this masking and what has enabled me to become more authentically myself so that I feel a true sense of belonging is started in my brain. It started with me shifting my mindset. And the judge is actually in the positive intelligence practice, the judge is the biggest saboteur. And we have all these internal saboteurs, they're called. There's 10 of them. And the judge is the
10?
biggest. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, there's 10 and I can label every single one of them now. So as soon as that saboteur comes out, I'm like, that was my victim. That was my pleaser. That's my hyperachiever. Or that's my, hyper analytical self, like all these saboteur voices. And the thing is, they live within us. And so what I've learned through this process is that I have the power to change that narrative within my head. So, and I noticed that when I changed that narrative, people started to see me differently because I started to see myself differently. And then, you start to be able to be comfortable being yourself, right? Not feeling like I need to be an imposter or I have to mask or I have different because this is what people expect of me. You start to quiet the inner voices and then you start to show up more. And that, that's confidence and self-esteem and all these things that we talk about. And I feel very lucky that I discovered positive intelligence and that it's unlocked my potential because who holds us back is ourselves.
Yeah, I agree on many levels on that. I guess my last question for you is one thing that I did once during IMEX was I had to go sit in a corner and ground myself because I was freaking out at some point because I was totally overstimulated. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to talk to. So I was kind of sat in a corner and just try to chill out. But in your experience, like how do you mentioned this rubbing thing with your fingers, but are there other things that you do to kind of help yourself just kind of like readjust in a moment where you feel a certain way about the environment you're in, or if it's just a lot going on, or if it's just like lights or it sounds or all those things?
So all these micro tools that I teach in my workshops and help others, they are so simple, Eming, and we have all of them. You don't have to go out there and buy something. You don't need to learn new skills. These are literally things that we can access. And the key to it is understanding essentially how to tap into your 5 senses. And so when you are feeling overwhelmed and your nervous system is in overdrive, you're not feeling safe. When you said that you needed to go and find a quiet space, your body was telling you something is not okay here and I don't feel safe. And you knew to go and find an escape. And so sometimes you don't have the opportunity to do that. And so that's where like my micro practices have come in so powerful and so handy because even like I was on that panel, I accessed the breath and I also did this finger rubbing. I couldn't go to a quiet space. I was sitting on the panel. I literally couldn't escape. So I accessed the things that I could. So there are 5. So we have 5 senses. So I'll just teach you one of each really quickly.
Sure.
The tactile, that's the sense of touch. It's called tactile. So the rubbing of the fingertips is so easy because you have your fingertips, literally we talk about like things at your fingertips. That's essentially what you're doing. You're just rubbing your two fingers together until you start to feel the texture and the ridges on your fingertips. And what you're doing in that moment is you're noticing one of your senses. And when you practice this, you'll realize that whatever that moment was that had me spiraling out of, in my mind, you've just distracted yourself. You're like, oh, I'm focusing instead on my fingers. And then you're like, oh, wait a second. I just forgot what I was thinking about or that was stressing me out. So that actually brings your nervous system back to safety. It's called grounding or it's a pause and whatnot. And then visual. So if you can't do the finger rubbing because, whatever, your hands are unavailable, and you can actually do it through visual. So hyper focus on something that you can see. And then just notice all the patterns and the details, the color, the texture, the design. Just like, let's say I love doing this. If I'm out walking, I love to look at leaves and I love to notice the shape of the leaves and all the little lines. So what you're doing is you're engaging your visual sensory system and focusing on just that system so that it distracts it from like the spiraling thought that you might have, right? Like let's say you're nervous and then you just hyper on something, it'll actually calm you down. Auditory. So if you are able to if you're focusing on something and it's stressing you out, looking at something and it's stressing you out, and you just like close your eyes and you just listen, and you'll start to listen for different noise levels, or sounds. So I can close my eyes and I can hear the car driving by my street, and I can also hear my heater going, and I can when you start to bring awareness to your auditory system, you're distracting it from whatever thought it was. And then the breath, right? The breath is a go-to. It's so easy. It's just like a deep breath. You want to exhale. You want to inhale in less than you exhale out. So 4 breaths in and then 5 breaths out. That will calm your system almost instantly. And what's the other one? Taste. I mean, obviously, some people like to chew gum. Maybe you put a piece of candy in your mouth, like kind of an obvious one, because what you're doing is activating your sense of taste and you're directing sort of that attention to your sensory. I mean, these are all things that we have access to. Right. So the way that we regulate ourselves, it should be accessible and it should be available to us at any given time. And you probably hear this. The reason why I teach what I teach in microdoses is that when you are in a moment of stress and let's say you're freaking out, you're overwhelmed, you're overstimulated, you're not going to be able to access these wider, bigger strategies that are step by step and tools you need to access. You're not, because your brain, when you're in a nervous system state of feeling safe, it actually will not be able to access your logical brain. And a lot of the tools and resources and skills and whatnot that we learn, we come to use our logical brain. You are stressed out and you can't access it. What good is that going to do you? What you can access are these micro things, taking a deep breath, rubbing your fingers together, just looking at something and focusing on the details, doing a piece of gum, there's so much power in these micro practices that I can clearly talk about this all day, every day.
I wish we could. That'd be a really great time. Just talking.
Yes,
I'd be down. I'd be down for that. Just the whole day of talking about this. That'd be great. I guess the one thing I should ask you before we end the show is, where can people find you? Like if they have more questions for you, or they want to know about what you do, or they want to work with you, like where can they reach out to you, or what's that process look like? Yes.
I mean, obviously you can find me on LinkedIn. My name is a little harder to spell. So my website is NeuroSpark Plus, all spelled out, .com. You can find a lot of information there. I do need to update the website a little bit, but there's contact details. I also have a lot of resources on there, and I will be starting my blog soon just to be able to share a lot of this, because right now, I'm a parent to 2 neurodivergent children and they're young. And so this is not my full-time job. My full-time priority job is parenting. And so I juggle and try to provide as much as I can to help my peers in this industry. I love going on podcasts so that allows me to be able to share my message more broadly. Yeah. So I think that's probably the best place. LinkedIn or my website is a good place to start.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Yush. We really appreciated this for being on our show. This was great. This was amazing. Like, it was better than I thought it was going to be. Like, that's how great it was.
Thank you so much. Well, there's more where that came from. If you ever want to follow up or chat, like, I'm very happy to have these conversations.
Well, I will definitely be reaching out to you in the future. You can best believe that will be happening.
Yes.
If there's a part 2 on ways to, like, be more thoughtful in event design for this, I think that'd be
absolutely. I feel like we just scratched the surface. There's so much to unpack here,
For sure.
And if we think about it, we're humans and we're complex. So why would designing for humans not be complex? So
yeah, we are complicated, but all for the good of things.
That's what makes us amazing, right? Because without human complexity, I don't think we would be able to do all these amazing things that we do. So thank you so much for having me on this show. Yes, and I loved our conversation and I loved meeting you. And I hope we can, get a chance to connect again.
For sure. Thank you all. And Yush specifically for being here for this episode. I really appreciate all the things that she said, and it was very informative, and I learned a lot about myself, honestly, between the session she was in and now. So that felt very good. So I hope listeners also feel seen in certain ways, because I know I definitely did. Now, if you're looking for more of us or just more content in general, because I know, like, we're a content hungry society / industry, Smart Meetings has a new page on our website on smartmeetings.com. It's called SmartCast Central, and you can find not only more of me, but more of What One Thing and a lot of other events and meetings podcasts that we're hosting on our website. So if you are looking for a range of information, you'll definitely find it at SmartCast Central on smartmeetings.com. So please check that out. And we have so much more for you coming in these next couple months, and we really hope that you're excited, because we definitely are. So until then, I'll see you guys next time. Bye.
A small star radio. Small star radio. Ready, set, here we go with another episode. Watch as we learn and grow. A small star radio. Small star radio. Ready, set, here we go with another episode. Watch as we learn and grow. Starting smart is the action we design. Meeting other minds, how to better use our time. Leading, interceding, proceeding, they divine. It's believing, they conceding, so it goes on.
You've been listening to Smart Start Radio, a Smart Meetings production. Interested in being our next guest? Connect with us at editor@smartmeetings.com.